of the football as a quarterback. Can they find that perfect marriage?
Yep, Tanner Engstrand with the Lions last 5 seasons, last 3 as passing game coordinator. Adam, on to New England. Many thought the Pats would be big spenders on the offensive side of the ball. They really made a splash defensively. Maybe that makes sense. Mike Vrabel taking over. What's the big move there?
Well, Hannah, when Mike Vrabel came in, he knew how much work there was to be done, and they started on the defensive side of the football. You see the notable defensive additions headline by Milton Williams and Carlton Davis. Harold Landry III comes in, Robert Spillane, the linebacker from the Raiders. And so the Patriots attacked the defensive side of the football in free agency, which should allow them to focus in on the offensive side of the football in the draft.
Field, what's the big question?
Yeah, who's protecting Drake May is still the big question for the Patriots. There is an answer available at number 4 overall, most likely. That, of course, will be LSU's Will Campbell, who, despite the fact that he measured in with 32 5/8" arms at the combine, I believe is clearly the best tackle in this year's draft class, and a guy that I believe has the potential to become a Pro Bowl caliber player at the NFL level. Clean tape for him, not just this season, but the 2 years prior to that. The Patriots don't really have a ready-made option in-house. Vidarian Lowe, their starter from last season, showed that when he's on the field, the Patriots simply need to be better. This team has to find a way to protect their franchise quarterback.
Speaking of franchise quarterbacks, the Bears got theirs last season. Caleb Williams, first overall. They hired Ben Johnson as their head coach. Adam, what was their big move this offseason to support their investment?
Well, Hannah, you see it right there. The offensive line has been remade. They've traded for Joe Thuney. They've added Jonah Jackson through another trade. They signed Drew Dahlman in free agency from the Atlanta Falcons, and this is a line that really needed it. It allowed 68 sacks last season, the 3rd highest total in NFL history in any one season for any one quarterback. Caleb Williams was battered around, and it was no surprise that when the new head coach Ben Johnson came in, that he saw what Detroit succeeded at, beefing up its offensive line, and the Bears wasted no time doing that, already adding 3 projected starters, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they added more help in the draft.
Well, the Bears have the 10th pick in the draft, Adam, as we know, and ESPN Analytics tells us there are several ways that they could go. They are most likely, according to analytics, to take Michigan corner Will Johnson or Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, 19% chance. LSU tackle Will Campbell, his name comes up again and again. 3rd most likely selection at 13%. Mina, what do you think the Bears should do at 10?
Yeah, it's interesting to see Will Johnson there because cornerback is not one of my 2 outcomes that I think are most likely with pick 10. I have it as a choice for them between going with the trenches, and I say the trenches because it's both the offensive line, offensive tackle, or they could choose to bolster that defensive line, or adding a skill player, Ashton Jeanty, or perhaps even one of the tight ends, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. A lot of this is going to depend on simply who is actually available there at 10. There's a good chance Ashton Jeanty and Will Campbell aren't there. But if both of those 2 players in particular are there at 10, I think that's a very interesting decision for Chicago. Their new head coach, Ben Johnson, comes from a team that was built in the trenches in Detroit, but also a team that drafted a running back in the 1st round in Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think he's going to have an interesting choice to make.
If they're both there, you take the offensive tackle. And I understand interesting, but I believe it's easy if you're the Chicago Bears. MK, I agree with your point with Detroit, because when we think of the Lions, we think of, well, Jared Goff and Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, they all came after the offensive line. All of them came after the offensive line. So if I'm Chicago, Ryan Poles, the general manager, who's an ex-offensive lineman, Ben Johnson, who just came from that place, it's offensive line, build that. Also, DeAndre Swift is awesome. I think he's a really good player. So for me, this is easy if I'm the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, if Will Campbell is there, to me, it's a dream scenario for Chicago. I was just talking about how I think the Patriots should sprint the card in if both Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are off the board.
Would be a mistake if they did not.
I agree on that.
We're going to get to that later in the show, actually.
Will Campbell, by the way, who I mentioned, left tackle player, played left tackle for 3 seasons at LSU, but he does have the opportunity to move into guard if need be at some point in his career. But keep in mind, Joe Thuney, who the Bears acquired this offseason, 32, going into a contract year. Braxton Jones, their incumbent left tackle, is also going to be a free agent after this upcoming year, plus is recovering from ankle surgery. So to me, you can never have enough layers of offensive line depth. The Bears learned that the hard way this past year, Mina. So to me, Will Campbell will be a very enticing pick at 10.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Also, the financial advantages of getting a tackle on a rookie contract. However, I will throw out one more thing. The Bears are picking behind a couple of teams that could also draft tackles. Notably, I'm looking at the New York Jets, right, at number 7. So I also wonder if maybe there's some desire on their part, if they love Will Campbell, to maneuver up in the draft, if they feel that they have to get him and that there's a drop-off from him and Membu to the next tier of tackles.
If Campbell's not there and you're the Bears, let's say Campbell and Genty aren't there, neither of them. Is it the young tackle from Ohio State, the young man from Missouri?
Josh Simmons. I think if Armand Membu is there, I'd consider it, but Membu is a true right tackle coming out of college. Darnell Wright's probably the player the Bears feel the best about having, not just for right now, but also for the next, let's call it 5 to 7 years. I'm thinking more pass rusher if they hang tight at number 10.
And here's the thing, a lot to think about because they have 3 picks in the top 50, more than any other team in the NFL. So some maneuvering definitely possible. All right, let's get Shefty back in here for some more top stories. Shefty, the Steelers start their voluntary workouts 2 weeks from today. Are they any closer to landing Aaron Rodgers? I feel like that's a mandatory question.
Well, Hannah, I think that we're going to continue to talk about Aaron Rodgers as a top headline until we hear from Aaron Rodgers, which we haven't. And my understanding is it is not at this time any further along than it's been. Pittsburgh's continuing to wait, and it will wait until there is an answer from Aaron Rodgers. You mentioned the offseason program in 2 weeks. Do they really need an answer before then? In the next 2 weeks? Probably not. So Aaron Rodgers can take his time. Meanwhile, Julio Jones has weighed in with his answer. He's walking away from the game and starting the clock on his time in Canton, Ohio, where he inevitably will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. One of the great wide receivers in NFL history with so many highlight grabs. The one that stands out is the one he made against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, but there are any number of big plays in which he sprinted downfield, scored touchdowns. A tremendous career for Julio Jones and a tremendous career for Teron Armstead as well, who also announced his retirement over the weekend. A multi-time Pro Bowl selection, finishes up at left tackle in Miami, was a stalwart in New Orleans, was a locker room leader and one of the smartest players wherever he was. And those are 2 notable players who over the course of the past few days have announced their retirement from playing in the National Football League.
Yeah, played on a really, really bad knee all of last season. So where does this leave Miami? Well, the Dolphins offense had its share of problems last season. We all saw it. They ranked 28th in pass block win rate and yards per rush. They also had 80 rushes for a loss, by far the most in the NFL. And keep in mind, the Dolphins led the NFL in yards per rush. In 2023, Armstead lined up at left tackle for over 75% of their offensive snaps last season. Daniel, so where does this retirement leave them?
I think that the present construction of the way that they play offensive football in Miami, while I love it, has a shelf life. And the advantage that they get is so scheme dependent, both in the run and the pass. You really want to be presence dependent. When teams, Philadelphia, they're presence dependent. Sometimes they could just call plays. We're better, we're bigger, we're stronger, we're going to beat you up. The same with Detroit. And so there has to be a little bit of a philosophy shift, I think, of like, let's get bigger and more physical, not just high flying.
Yeah, it reminds me kind of a baseball pitcher going through the lineup for a second or third time. Teams have kind of caught up to them. If the Dolphins do not address offensive tackle at 13, which I don't think they will, if Will Campbell is gone and Armand Membu is gone, they can go to the other side of the ball and grab a different Will, that being Will Johnson from from Michigan, a player who would go to Miami in this scenario. Johnson played just 6 games this past season. He had 2 pick sixes in those 6 games. He's been out because of a foot injury. He did not run at the combine. There are some questions about the elite speed here for Will Johnson. That being said, this guy's instincts, his ball skills, and his size are so rare and so unique that I think 13th overall makes a ton of sense. Opposite of Jalen Ramsey, Miami needs to address that cornerback spot at some point during the draft.
Yeah, Will Johnson didn't allow a single touchdown in coverage over the last
like a good stat to me,
seasons.
right?
There, I learned that from Field Yates, by the way. We're just getting started.
That's because Field's the GOAT.
Yeah, story. All right. How about this year's draft? very interesting. Tyler Shuck enters the draft with a strong arm off a career best year at Louisville. Also questions about his age. He turns 26 in September. Began his college career all the way back in 2018. Played for 3 different schools over 7 years. And joined NFL Live last week to talk about his age.
I feel like I have all the physical characteristics, but I've kind of gone through all the mental side of it to where I've had to, go through lacks of confidence. I've had to go through, being a transfer, being injured, being cut, and all these things that happen in the NFL. And, I just love football so much and kind of just stayed strong and stayed true to it. And I feel like I'm only growing and getting better. So I'm just really excited to kind of continue this process and finish up these last visits and hopefully get some good news at the end of the month.
So Shuck is projected to go somewhere in the first 3 rounds. He's going to be 25 years old at the start of this season. Now, since 2020, only these quarterbacks went in the top 3 rounds and were at least 24 years old at the start of their rookie season. Penix, Nix, Levis, Pickett, all a year younger than Shuck. So, Dan, you could look at the fact that age brings experience, I guess. How does all of this play into your analysis?
I think it matters. The more you've seen things, the better you are at seeing them in the future. And I understand college and NFL is different, but he still has seen a ton of football. I also like the fact that he's been in a bunch of different programs and a bunch of different conferences. You start in the Pac-12, and all of a sudden it's like, there's a style of football that you're accustomed to there and defenses that you're accustomed to there. And then you go to Texas Tech in the Big 12, and there's a style of offense that is a part of that conference and the type of defenses you see in that conference. And then you go to the ACC, and again, you see a lot of different styles. And so I appreciate that. I also appreciate that it seems like he's handled it all. So all those different coverages and all those different offenses that he's been exposed to can only be a benefit. The question mark that is how much more can he grow? How much more can he be exposed to and stressed from to develop and enhance his game? Or is he near the top? That's something that you got to figure out one-on-one.
Yeah, I think, Dan, you put it really well there. When we talk about quarterback age and why it matters so much to teams and the evaluation process, because we look at a quarterback and